and welcome to our guest, Mr. Kingsley Ewere. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Okay, so thank you so much. I can see some questions to already popping up in the chat there, which we will answer definitely. But at the moment, we can go to our questions. I know we all know our guests, but we just want to say a very big thank you for for coming over again this time to join us in this conversation. Thank you so much for making our time to join us. Okay, so we will go straight to a few questions, and I think the first one is asking you rather to share some strategies for identifying undervalued properties in competitive market, especially for those of us on a tight budget.
When you say undervalued properties, those can be regarded as more or less like below market value properties. And even though they can be below market value properties, there are a reason why they are. And sometimes some of the things you can look at is, well, the first place you have to go for such things are mainly online marketplace like Zoopla, Rightmove. But apart from just being on Zoopla and Rightmove, there are a few plugins or add-ons on your computers that can help you search for such properties. I know there was one called Property Tracker. It's like a plugin that you can add to your browser, and it can help you scan for properties that are like low price. But again, these properties are low for a reason. So some are cheap for a reason. So
okay. Oh, interesting morning. Okay, so like the guest was saying there, some properties are low definitely for a reason. They might need to do some work, some renovation, and that's why they are low. And in some cases, you might get undervalued property depending on the vendor's motivation to sell. For some people, they don't want to keep the house. Maybe they are moving into care and they need to get the house sold as soon as possible. So they are motivated to sell. It means that you can negotiate based on that to get a good deal for yourself. Okay, thank you so much, sir. I think our guest is back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, so let's take the next question, which is what is your approach to due diligence when assessing the condition of a potential investment property? And if you could talk about some red flags that newcomers should watch out for.
I think one of the due diligence would be how much would the property generate in terms of income, rental yield. So some of the things that before you go for property, you have to first of all check, will I get enough money from this property? Would I be investing in a hole whereby I'm investing and nothing is coming back out? But then you have to look at the structural integrity of the property. I know there are, when you go to property, they tell you airline crack, those little cracks. You have to make sure you've got someone who's well knowledgeable to actually inspect those little cracks for you, because one airline crack can affect the structure of the property. And dampness, window and insulations. Is there a leak on the roof? Because roof leaking can cause dampness. I know dampness is bad for property and also to our health as well. And also location. Would you buy a house whereby there are limited internet access or even network coverage? So I think the main thing is just make sure you have the proper inspection done on the property, and avoid false marketing by agents. Because agents can market false property to you, and then you end up buying a property because they've painted everything to make it look all shiny, but then in a few months' time you start having issues coming up. So I think just go with the right professional who would be able to assess these properties for you. And again, don't be in a rush.
Yeah, thank you so much. Don't be in a rush. I mean, take your time. Of course, you might say, oh, people are bidding. A lot of people want the property. But one thing I will say is it is better to take your time. than to then look back and say, I wish you had waited, because at that time you have committed a lot of money and you cannot even easily get this money back. Thank you so much for sharing that. The other third question is about the specific legal or regulatory considerations in the UK property market that believe beginners should be aware of before making their first investment. So, what does the law say? What should we know before trying to invest in property?
Well, as we know, in the UK where we live in, everything is regulated. You cannot just do something just because you want to do it. There's a law safeguarding yourself as a landlord or as an investor, and also future tenants as well. One of the main thing is if you're buying a property to have it tenanted, you need to be registered. You must have the relevant registration. I know there is a smart rent, which is you have to register with the Welsh government if you're going to be renting out a property by yourself without using an estate agent. The good thing about smart rent is they help you do the council tax registration, and they inform all the third party like Welsh Water that need to know that this house is has got a new landlord, and then that way you don't have to start doing all those things by yourself. And also you have to comply with the right to rent rule also in the UK. Whereby now before you rent a house to someone, you need to check that they can actually rent a house through the right to rent law.
Okay, I think we again in
Really
internet.
important. And also you have to make sure that those tenants that their deposit is actually protected, and then you just cannot evict them just like that. And then if you are going for HMO property, you must make sure that you've obtained the relevant license to operate an HMO house. And also,
Okay.
there are also taxes to be aware of. But that's just a little. I know my network is really bad, so I won't dive into more.
Okay, I think we lost you a bit in the where we were talking about the smart rent and registering with them so that they can do the utility for you, the council tax. Yeah, so if you could just summarize that part again, that would be
So
great.
with smart rent, it's an initiative whereby which by the Welsh government. So if you're going to be a private landlord, you need to register with them. What that means that you actually it's not free. You pay actually. You pay to be with them. And what that means is that they offer you um training to be a landlord. So you have to do a landlord course, and you have to
Okay.
pass the landlord course. If you don't pass it, you must pass the landlord course. And then what that does is that they manage the admin part of it. So they tell you that, oh, before you rent your house out, you need to make sure the tenant has got a contract, and which is before it used to be the assured tenancy agreement, but now it's
Yes.
more. And then need to make sure that their deposit is well protected in a deposit protection scheme. And also what they do is that they send that information to the council, and then so that way the council don't have to start looking for who owns the property and
Mhm.
everything. Also, they send information also to Westwater if it's uh, SSC or whichever utility companies owns manages the property. So that way everything is more streamlined.
Okay. All right, so thank you so much. That's good to know that again there is a landlord course. So if you think you have finished reading, you have just started. It's a very interesting one there. All right, thank you so much. So I think we can take our next question, which says, how do you manage risk in your property investment portfolio? And what risk mitigation strategies do you recommend for newcomers?
I think for this question, a few things come to mind. One of them is risk could be house price could drop. Question could be what about if your tenants do not pay? Also maintenance cost of the property, and also what about if you're unable to find tenants?
Hmm.
A few risks that come to mind with that. But just to say a few, I think it's important to actually buy a property at the right price. As you said earlier on, don't say because everyone is bidding I want to make sure this is my first one. I need to get on the ladder. No, don't be in a rush. So try to buy at the right price. And most important one is liquidity. If depending on where the stage you are in terms of investment, if it's your first one or if you've got the finances to get more, liquidity is more or less like spreading your loss and your risk. And rather than having just one bite to let, you can have
Okay, so sorry about the internet experience that we're having this morning.
so
So I
for so
believe, okay. Yes, sir. You can go ahead. You're talking about liquidity and rather having one buy to let or single buy to let. Yes.
and you can spread your risk and by having various investment strategy. But again, it all depends on where you are instead in terms of your property investment, and also rent areas. Try to see if your landlord insurance can cover unpaid rent. Or if you don't want to go through that, you can do rent to rent, so that way you don't have to think about the rent coming in. You can just sublet the house to an individual or a company who, well, if I say manage rental agency, then that could cost you money. But you can send to an individual who can do a rent to rent as well. That
Okay.
way, focusing on the tenant, you may then entrusting your property to an individual or a family or whoever who can then guarantee you rent regardless. And again, maintenance costs. Just sometimes you have to educate your tenant as well. Sometimes they could be boiler may not be working. It may have to do with the pressure. But if you don't educate the tenant, you may end up spending more money for
On
maintenance.
True, true. All right, thank you so much. We have a listener question around rent to rent, and I think we should be able to take that afterwards. So we just plan for that. So there'll be more discussion on rent to rent. What does it mean, and is it how easy it is, and is it still feasible? But let's move on to some of our other questions, and then we'll come back to the audience questions. So if you have any questions, please pop them in the comments, and then we can answer them. If you get your question earlier, then we can be able to move to those questions as early as possible. Okay, so the other question is what are some key financial metrics or indicators that you track to assess the performance of your property investment? And so, how can a new beginner use these tools effectively?
When you say financial metrics, these are more or less like ways you can track your investment financially, again properly, just to make sure you are doing the right thing. Because the reason why you go into investment is to yield profit, and if you're not yielding profit, then I think you're the wrong field or in the wrong investment. One of them is rent to yield. If you're not getting enough yield from your investment, then like I said, you're in the wrong place.
So, if you
And
can just explain what that rental yield is, how do you calculate it?
so rental yield is more or less like you divide your annual income, right, that you're getting from the property, by the property market value.
Okay,
So that's how your annual income you divide that by the market value. So that's why you know the percentage of yield you're making from that particular property.
okay.
Um, Again, cash flow. You have to be able to track all your expenses. You have to know how much you're getting, how much you're spending monthly. You have to have it all well detailed. Because I know sometimes we Africans, it's more or less like negligence. We don't keep record. We just think, oh, it's all in my brain, it's all in my brain, but it's not. Sometimes you could spend £50 for a plumber, and that is not properly recorded. And I know at the end of the year, you'll be like, oh, actually, where did all my money go?
Mm,
So sometimes, again, depends on where you are at your investment stage. You can start with things like a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet. You don't have to be an Excel guru. You can do a simple T account. I'm not an accountant, so T account is literally having a debit side and a credit side, and you just compare both to see where you're going. And if you can see at the bottom you're having a deficit, then you can say, okay, what's going on? Am I spending too much money somewhere? So things like that. And also you can have tools such as banking app. Because right now they've made things so easy now whereby you can have bank accounts for SMEs, whereby they help you categorize your spends. So if you think Excel is too much for you, fine. There are banks like Tide Business Banking, Counting Up Business Banking, whereby whenever you spend money, whenever you receive money, you can categorize those expense and income, and at the end of the year, you can then group those. They help you group those income according to what you spend them on. So
Okay.
that way, when it's time to do your, let's say, self-assessment at the end of the year, you've got this information ready. So I think it's just in proper record. And again, if you've got one property, then Excel spreadsheet is good for you. But if you've got more, you can invest on accounting softwares.
Okay, thank you so much. I just to quickly mention that although Tide and Counting Up were mentioned as business banking bank, uh, we have not been paid to mention them. So there are other business bank account
Oh,
out there for you to use. Yes, thank you so much for sharing that information. I hope we are taking notes. And if you miss it, the video will be available on YouTube for you to view. Okay, so let's go to another question. Um, this question is: are there any specific tax considerations that property investors should be aware of in the UK, and how can they optimize their tax strategies?
for this, in the UK, nothing is free. That's one thing I have to say. Sometimes we pay to even breathe the air that we breathe every day. So when it comes to property investment, I see it as a three-way point for tax. The beginning, at the middle, and at the end. At the beginning, there's what called the stamp duty, which you pay for all property that you purchase. And then, if the more you purchase, the price goes up for every other property you get. So let's assume you bought your first property and you pay stamp duty for it, depending on if it's a new build or old build. Sometimes for new builds, they can waive the stamp duty if depending on the amount of the property. I know during COVID there was a freeze for stamp duty, but I know it's back on now. And then
But sorry, I thought that is for residential
yes,
buyers, not for landlords, right?
yes, yes. But again, residential buyers can turn into a property investment in the future. But for property investment, for your second home, which is probably for investment, you pay 4% stamp duty on the value of the property. So if you're buying property for like 100,000, regardless, you have to pay for 4%. That's what it is. And then uh at the middle part where I say whatever you pay, just like your payee,
Yeah.
pay as you earn, you pay tax on your property that you have. So if you previously it used to be you paying tax on your profit, but now you're paying tax on the actual value of the actual rental value. So if your property is being rented out for £900, you're paying tax for £900. You're not paying tax for £200 profit. You're paying tax for the actual £900. Now UK government HMRC don't care if your mortgage is £500. They don't care. They want the full tax for the full rent that you're making. And then, and I don't know, and after you decide to sell that property, if you're doing flip to sell, fix to flip, or if you want to wait for like 5 years time or 10 years time to sell the property, you pay capital gain on the property as well. So there are tax on there. Then to optimize this tax, well, as Totola said, this I'm not being paid for this to give you this advice, but you always consult a professional. If you're not sure, there are accountants everywhere that you can always ask the questions. How can you mitigate this risk? How can you prepare to these taxes? And as I said earlier on, I think the key is keeping accurate records. If you don't know what to spend your money on, then you won't know how to keep record. And again, stay informed. I'm sure there are tax classes or webinars that you can attend. I'm sure attend stewardship webinar. There will be more to be said about this. And also, if you're expanding your business, you can um, gain those profits through having a limited company. But again, depends on the level or the stage you are in your investment journey.
Yes, thank you so much for that. I think one of the things people did after I think 2016 or 2017 when the government brought in the law that, okay, in the past you might be able to, if your I know your mortgage is £500, your rent is £900, you only pay tax on £400. So the you take out that
Right.
cost, from the amount, but now you have to pay flat on everything. So that makes it a little bit tricky for people. So if you are going to have more than one property, or you are thinking of having lots of property in the future, then the recommendation from a lot of people is, or property investor, is to use limited company. That's the special purpose vehicle companies, SPVs. And the essence of using that is, it's easy for you to, sell on the company. So if you sell the company, you're selling the properties within the asset of the company. And you can even sell shares in that company, such that anyone who buys shares in the company buys part of the property as well. So it has its own benefit. And then the limited company can, or limited liability company can, offset the cost of the mortgages, the cost of doing the business. So again, at this point, once you have decided that you're going to launch into it, you need to sit down, do your cost, do your numbers, and do your research as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. Uh, if you have any question, please do pop that in the chat. I'll have a look at the chat and see if you have more questions. But let's take this question about rental properties. So for those that are interested in rental properties, so what are the tips for finding reliable tenants and maintaining positive landlord-tenant relationship? And if possible, can you talk about from a tenant to a landlord? Because again, many people on the call want to become landlord, okay, or homeowner. So if they are maybe renting now, how can you, from your side as a tenant, build that relationship with your landlord, but at the same time look at it from the landlord perspective as well?
I think the important part of this is education and orientation. As a tenant, you're looking for shelter, and as a landlord, you're looking for the right tenant who would be able to pay their rent on time. And when you come to a common ground, there will be no dispute. I think for a landlord, it's more or less like screening thoroughly for the right tenant. And to do that, you have to be able to verify incomes, check references, be fair in terms of increasing your rent, and also try to maintain the property. And if you tick those boxes as a landlord, you will be able to maintain relationship with the tenant. But from a tenant point of view, you're looking for a landlord who will be able to be proactive in terms of maintenance, a landlord who will be considerate in terms of not just increasing the rent whenever they feel like, or a landlord who won't just want to barge into your home because they think they are the landlord. It's respecting that privacy. So again, it all depends on how you deal with each other, and also in individual personalities as well. But if a landlord meets his obligation as a landlord, tenant will meet the obligation as a tenant. And I know sometimes they can be difficult tenants, but if you don't give them a reason to be difficult, they won't be difficult.
Okay, thank you so much. So don't keep the process, go with the due diligence. Even if you meet the person in church and they want to rent, still go through the referencing and everything. Otherwise, it becomes very tricky to have the law on your side because you've not really done it in the right way. Okay, so I think we are drawing down to a close, and I want us to take this one more very important question. Again, we know that it's good to buy. We want to build capital, we want to build wealth, we want to get that rental, the income from the property. But at some point, you will decide to exit, you decide to sell, you decide to move on. So, what is your exit strategy for property investment, and how do you decide when it's time to sell or reinvest in your portfolio?
I think with this comes down to individual preferences. Everyone have got a reason why they venture into property investment. It could be because they want to save their save towards their pension in the future. Because some people regard property investments as a pension plan,
Mm.
while some regard it as a monthly income generating, like extra income. And then in the future, it could be a way to acquire max wealth as well. So it's really an individual option. But for example, if you're focusing on it as getting a extra income every month, you could some people could decide to leave it for years. But then, if you leave it for years, there are always pros and cons. If you leave it for years, what about if the property value falls? What about if one day Northwich comes into your property and then damages the structure of a property, and that reduces the value of a property? Or what about if in 2 years' time someone comes in and offer you 50% more than
Mm.
what your property is currently worth? Would you sell, or would you still wait and just wait on monthly income? So it all depends on individual preferences, really. Because some people may decide to sell, may decide to sell the property, generate the capital gain, and then
Yeah,
buy more. And that way, you're building wealth as you go, rather than waiting for 10 years or 15 years to sell.
passion.
Yeah, so it all depends on individuals really, and their strategy. There's no right way or wrong way about it.
Yes, thank you so much. I think I was hearing some people say never sell a property as a mantra, but those people have now start changing their mind to say, okay, it's not about the number of property you have in your portfolio; it's about the value of the portfolio. So you can have 10 houses, and they are all worth 100,000 each, for example. Of course, that's 1 million easily. But imagine you then have two houses that are worth 750,000 each. You have less stress to manage, but then the income or the value of the property already equates the 10 even or more. And you can think about it that you have fewer tenants to deal with. So it means that you can still have quality of life. You can still be abroad, and one tenant did not call you for your property one this week, property two next week, and so on. So you still have life. So it's about the value of the property portfolio, not the number of property in it. So you can start, of course, you are starting small, you can build that quantity, and from there you can then start looking at quality and down the line. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with us, Mr. Kingsley. We're really, really grateful. Before we let you go, we have a few audience questions which I think we can take. And one of these is, you've mentioned something around rent to rent. So someone is asking, if you intend to start with rent to rent or service apartment and have some money saved already, what is the first step, or what is the first step to take right away?
Rent to rent is tricky. It's a good one because you don't require a lot of money to start rent to rent, but it's finding the right landlord who is offering to entrust their house to you. Again, it's also about more or less like service apartments. When you say service apartments, are you going to buy the property and then start to do it as an Airbnb? Or are you going to look for a property who you're going to do rent to rent from and then turn that into a service apartment? So it's a tricky one. It's common in UK, but again, it depends on you meeting the right person to
Mm.
say, right, Mr. A, take my property. I haven't got the time and stress to deal with tenant. Do what you want to do with it, and then give me my income every month. It exists, but it's tricky. So if you've got money saved somewhere already, there are no right step to take regarding that. You just have to find the right landlord to entrust with the house. But then you have to think that when that happens, right? Let's assume, again, in every strategy there are pros and there are cons. If you've got a two-bedroom house, that is worth a rental income of now £900, and landlord is expecting you to give them £600, and then you've got £200 left at the end of the month, which you think you would be your profit. But then what happens if there is a breakdown of maintenance cost of the property? So is that coming out from the £300 left from you? And if that's coming out from that, then how much do you? What about in a month? There are different things that happened, and you spend more than that £300. You're losing money already.
Mm.
Money you save personally would eventually go into the property. So you're already in deficit. So it's a tricky one. It's easy to make quick money or fast money as well, or fast profit if there are no issues to arise. But again, in property management, there are always going to be issues to arise. So it's
True.
about right property, the right landlord who's ready to say, right, okay, it's fine. I know what you're doing, so we can go 50-50 on this. So that way, either way, you can also make, even if it's £100 or 1% profit. Profit is profit. That is 1% or 0%. It's also profit.
True. And I think with this rent to rent or rent to service apartment, just put a caveat there that we need to be very careful. There are a lot of people selling courses on how to become a billionaire from rent to rent or from with no money down, zero deposit and things like that. You need to be very careful that you don't spend the money saved on the courses and then you are left with nothing. I think we've seen a lot of things like that and being mentioned on the internet. But again, I think it's finding that landlord that is key. But one thing you can do is to build relationship with estate agents. Now, estate agents know the landlord coming to them to say we want to rent out our property. Based on what the landlord has told them, they might